3 times in 90 minutes, the boldest man in the room became the biggest coward. The same person who attacked armed soldiers with a sword couldn't face the questions of a servant girl. And Jesus knew it would happen before it did. This is the night Simon Peter's identity shattered. This is what his breakdown reveals about every human under pressure. Simon Peter was not a careful man. He was a fisherman who left his nets to follow a carpenter. He was the disciple who walked on water until he looked down. He was the one who drew a sword in the Garden of Gethsemane when soldiers came to arrest Jesus. While others ran, Peter swung at the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Hours before that moment, Peter had made a promise. All 4 Gospels record it. In Matthew chapter 26, he declared to Jesus, "Even if I must die with you, I will never deny you." Peter said it loudest. Peter meant it most, or so he thought. After the arrest, something changed. Peter followed Jesus to the trial, but he followed at a distance. He entered the courtyard of Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest. It was late at night. The air was cold. People gathered around a charcoal fire for warmth. Peter sat among them, trying to blend into the shadows. The setting was dangerous. Jesus was inside, facing an illegal trial. The religious leaders wanted him dead, but needed Roman approval for execution. Outside, soldiers mixed with servants. Anyone connected to Jesus was at risk. Peter was sitting in enemy territory. His accent would give him away. His face was known. And then came the first question. To understand what happened next, we need to understand where Peter was standing. The house of Caiaphas sat on the eastern slope of Mount Zion in Jerusalem. Today, a church marks the spot called St. Peter in Gallicantu. That's Latin for the rooster's crow. Archaeologists have excavated this location and found a 4-level structure with ancient foundations, a guard room and a dungeon cistern carved into rock. This is likely where Jesus spent the night before his crucifixion. In 1990, archaeologists made a remarkable discovery in South Jerusalem. They found a burial cave with bone boxes inside. One box had an inscription, Caiaphas. This was the family tomb of the high priest who questioned Jesus. The physical evidence confirms the man and the trial were real. The political situation in Jerusalem was explosive. This happened around the year 30 to 33. The Romans occupied Judea. Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor who controlled all decisions about the death penalty. The Jewish religious leaders had limited power. They could arrest and question, but could not execute. This created a dangerous game. The religious leaders needed to convince Rome that Jesus was not just a religious problem, but a political threat. They had to change the charge from blasphemy to rebellion against Caesar. Anyone associated with Jesus became a suspect. Peter stood at the center of it all, warming his hands by a fire, hoping no one would notice him. A servant girl looked at Peter. She studied his face in the firelight. Then she spoke. "You were with Jesus of Nazareth." Peter's response was immediate. "I don't know what you're talking about." He moved away from the fire. That was the first denial. Time passed, maybe 30 minutes. Another servant girl saw him and told the people nearby, this man was with Jesus. Peter denied it again, this time with an oath. "I do not know the man." More time passed. The crowd grew suspicious. They noticed his accent. "You're definitely one of them. Your speech gives you away." Peter's third response was extreme. He began to curse and call down oaths upon himself. "I do not know the man." At that exact moment, a rooster crowed, and Jesus, being led from one part of the house to another, turned and looked directly at Peter. Peter remembered. Jesus had predicted this. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter had argued. He had promised loyalty. And now, in 90 minutes, he had denied his teacher 3 times with increasing intensity. The Gospels tell us Peter went out and wept bitterly. Here's the mystery. This was not a man afraid of death. Peter had swung a sword at armed soldiers. If fear of execution was the problem, Why didn't he run after the arrest? Why follow Jesus into danger? And why did servants' questions break him when Roman soldiers did not? Some scholars say Peter fell because he relied on his own strength instead of God's power. Others point to social pressure. Still others see trauma response. One interpretation is spiritual, another is psychological. Perhaps both are true at once. Modern psychology helps us understand what happened to Peter that night. He was experiencing acute stress response. When humans face extreme threat, the body activates 3 survival patterns: fight, flight, or freeze. Peter showed all 3 within hours. He fought with a sword, he followed at a distance, preparing for flight, and in the courtyard, he froze. The freeze response happens when fighting won't work and running isn't possible. The mind tries to make the person invisible. For Peter, this meant verbal denial. Each denial made the next one easier. Psychologists call this commitment escalation. Once Peter started lying, he had to keep lying to stay consistent. Peter had also made a catastrophically public promise. He declared in front of all the disciples that he would die for Jesus. When reality made that commitment impossible to keep, the psychological stress triggered collapse. Peter's identity was built on being the loyal one. When that identity crumbled, he had nothing left to stand on. The crowd made it worse. First, one person accused him, then another, then a whole group. Sustained public contradiction breaks down even strong beliefs. Peter faced what ancient wisdom calls the fear of man. But the story doesn't end with tears. Weeks later, after the resurrection, Jesus met Peter by the Sea of Galilee. 3 times, Jesus asked, "Do you love me?" 3 times, Peter answered, "Yes, Lord." 3 questions, 3 answers, 1 for each denial. This was trauma reprocessing. Jesus systematically addressed each painful moment with a new affirmation. He replaced shame with renewed purpose. The man who wept in the courtyard became the preacher who spoke to thousands on Pentecost. Complete breakdown led to complete restoration. Peter's collapse was not the end of his story. It was the breaking that made rebuilding possible. Perhaps the real mystery isn't why Peter failed, but why his failure had to be so complete. Because sometimes we cannot be rebuilt until we are fully broken. The rooster crowed. Peter remembered. And in that moment of despair, the foundation was laid for something stronger than confidence. It was humility. It was dependence. It was a strength that doesn't come from self-belief. If these ancient mysteries fascinate you, if you want to understand faith through history and human nature, subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button if this opens something new for you. Join us as we keep searching.